Should backing tracks be used in live music? Well guys, Kiss kicked off their End of the Road World Tour in this past week, and it started to get me thinking a little bit more about this topic and how tracks are really becoming more and more of a staple in live music. And it's certainly raising a huge debate within the music industry. Are tracks good? Are they bad? Is there a place for them, or should we get rid of them altogether? Well, that's one of the reasons why I made this video, is to start to explore this particular topic. It's only in recent years bands and the use of tracks have become more popular in live music. There was certainly a time back in 1990 where act Milli Vanilli was stripped of their Grammy Award after it was revealed that they had never actually sung any of their music. And of course there was huge outrage from audiences and critics after their live performance, live, I stress that word pretty loosely there, of their song Girl You Know It's True. And that song was actually entirely synced and ran into problems during the performance when the CD actually got stuck midway through and repeated a line over and over.
It stopped. Girl, you know it's girl, you know it's girl. 80,000 people. Girl, you know it's girl, you know.
In the early 2000s, Ashlee Simpson was slammed for her performance on SNL after it was revealed that she was performing to playback and didn't even try to hide it. Now, one thing to point out quickly here is that with that particular scenario, playback on TV performances has definitely been a common thing for decades. Take Iron Maiden's performance here, for example, where they make fun of it. Now, the interesting thing to point out here is that Iron Maiden at this point had had a few years building up a very, very solid fan base and built a lot of integrity as a reputation for being a really strong live act. Ashlee Simpson at this point, yeah. What is a common occurrence amongst touring pop acts now, artists like Britney Spears, for example, have admitted to using a mixture of playback and live voice during shows. And with the public fully aware of this, they actually still buy tickets to a show with the defense that they still get a great show. So it's got me thinking, have audiences dropped their expectations of live music between 1990 and now? Or do they only get outraged when the artist lies to them and isn't being transparent in what they are offering at a show? And the big question, are artists being lazy? So guys, these are all huge questions. Here's my take on it. Technology and being able to now use quality tracks of real instruments in a live setting is a wonderful device. You know, not so long ago, the availability of quality backing tracks was not so great and was often just MIDI samples, which, man, I gotta tell you, they sounded pretty awful. So the technology we have now is pretty fantastic, but I believe it's our relationship with this technology and how we use it that ultimately determines whether or not we are on the right track to providing something that our audiences are going to love. It's all a question of balance. Is the show that's being sold to us predominantly live, or are most of the instruments on stage predominantly tracked? Well, let's look at a couple of examples. We'll take Iron Maiden as an example again, and their song Power Slave. Now, Iron Maiden are reputable as being one of the greatest live rock bands in history. The use of tracks in a show is quite minimum, limited to intros for songs like Number of the Beast, for example, that they've been playing for years now. It's only quite recently they've brought in a small amount of tracking for songs like Power Slave. And for example here, during the chorus for Power Slave, we can actually hear a vocal choir effect that's being used to emulate the original recording. The rest of the show's sound, though, is pulled by a six-piece band playing entirely live. Now, this is a pretty good balance and a good example of how you can use tracks to enhance a live performance. Now, let's take another look at a rock band built on their strong reputation of live shows, and Kiss. In their recent TV performances, the Kiss Cruise, and now their End of the Road World Tour, while there's been no official statement from the band regarding it, it's quite obvious if you study footage carefully all over YouTube at the moment from recent shows, there is an amount of tracks being used on instruments and vocals, and the amount is quite staggering. Paul Stanley is lip-syncing his way through most of the shows. What's quite astonishing here is the band's reluctance to address what many Kiss fans have been getting outraged over. Simmons actually said prior to the tour kicking off, Kiss have never sounded better, and we are at the top of our game. Well, yeah, it's easy to sound great when you aren't actually performing most of your sound live. This to me is a show without a good balance of backing tracks where they've tipped the balance far too wide, and most of what is being heard off the stage is really not being performed here. So guys, if you're after a rant on Kiss in this video, I'm very sorry to disappoint. This isn't that at all. I'm really just using Kiss as an example of how tracks in a live music setting can go too far. They were one of the most iconic live bands of the 20th century. So it pains me to see a band that was so iconic and so great at what they do that are actually faking their performances like this now, particularly when Stanley had such a great voice as well. What's more, the audience here who've paid good money aren't being made aware of it, unlike Britney Spears, who came forward and admitted to using tracks live. She was quite transparent about it.
Why did you do that?
Well, look, there's a few reasons here, guys. In Kiss's example, you can see a drop-off in their ability to pull off their music live over the past 10 years, and particularly in Stanley's voice here.
Oh no.
So up until last year, Kiss were playing completely live, but it was apparent by this point Stanley's voice was completely shot. He was sounding pretty terrible. But rather than hang up the guitars and the makeup, the boys decided to go out for one last tour. And that's where the problem is. To use examples of touring acts on the club circuit, which is often where I tend to perform live, so I can speak from experience here, I would say 70% of my gigs throughout the year with various bands and artists across the year use tracks to some degree, and this is purely done as a way to fill out a sound that would need 6 to 7 musicians on stage to make. Using tracks is a way often to keep costs down of hiring more musicians, which if you've ever been in this circuit before, you would know that where you can cut expenses down with all the travel and gear that's often used as expenditure to make a show like that happen, then you tend to take those opportunities. And I also got to say guys as well, the stages that I'm often playing on, they tend to get pretty small as well. So sometimes fitting that amount of musicians on stage is just not feasible. For example, I work with a Pink Lady Gaga tribute, probably on average, like I would say twice a month, which has their whole 2-hour show completely tracked. The balance that I've been talking about in this video is still on the good side. With that show, there's still live acoustic drums, live vocals, guitar, of course, which is myself playing, bass guitar, and the tracks in this instance are often just keyboards, synth sounds, and some backing vocals to help fill out some of those extra harmonies. So it's still a pretty good balance with that show. And so quite often with any gigs that I tend to take on, if there are tracks being used, this is one of the questions that I will ask is what is on the tracks? Are we still performing live to a good percentage? So guys, just to sum everything up here quickly, I really believe it's a question of balance. When a show is getting to a stage where it's a live show without the live element anymore, and there's so much fakery going on, and the audience is duped into thinking it is a live show, then that's a problem. And I think it may be time to think about just scratching the show altogether and just putting on a CD instead, because really at the end of the day you're not that far off. For me guys, I love my live music live, okay, with that strong live element, because one of the things that's drawn me to music and why I got into music in the first place is that I'm really drawn to musical performance, and if it's just not there at the concert, then I don't really have a good time with it. But look, that's just me guys, okay? Anyone that would want to go to the Kiss tour at the moment and see the show knowing that most of it's tracked, I wouldn't stop them from going and having a good time. More power to you if you can enjoy that. But I think the most important thing for all of us to do here so that we don't get caught out is that we do our research, okay? With the internet, with Google, with YouTube, with so much information out there now, we can easily do research on any tours that are coming our way, and then we can make a really informed decision about any tickets we purchase. That way we're not going to a show that we're going to hate and rant on later and spend all this hard-earned cash on. So guys, what are your thoughts on all this? I think it's a really interesting topic, and I would love to hear all sides of this argument. Let me know in the comments below what you thought, and of course if you really dug this video, don't forget to flick a like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a really great deal. And of course more videos coming soon, guys. I'm a little bit slow on my uploads at the moment. I'm settling into the new studio here, and I'm also working on some new music at the moment too that I can't say too much about at the moment. But of course look out for more video uploads as they come. Don't forget guys, support the artist, buy the music. Rock on.